talk to you about what a lot of people say is the biggest challenge in business today. That's the ability to execute against plans that everybody makes. I'm going to talk specifically about a program that I have done or a consulting engagement that I've done with a number of clients, large and small. It's a program that's designed by, not designed by me, it's designed by a group of people, and a little bit of history about the program is this. This gentleman that you see, the picture on the lower side, is a guy called Larry Bossidy. He used to be with Allied Signal. He was the CEO, and then Allied Signal was at one point acquired by Honeywell. And he remained the CEO for some time and then moved out. And as happens quite often with a number of such mergers, the company went south. And so Larry came back, and he's largely accredited with his second stint as CEO. It was a short stint, not more than 18 months or so. He came out of retirement, became CEO again, turned the company around, and he said the issue was not what we were planning to do. The issue was never with the idea of the merger. The issue was knowing what we had to do and doing them were things that lived on two different planets. And he said that I came and fixed that. And then he got together with Ram Charan, who perhaps many of you know about here from. I believe was Jack Welch's coach for many, many years. He's a famous business writer. He's a coach. He's tons of things. These guys got together and put Larry's experiences down in this book. The book is called Execution. It's easily available. It's a pretty hot book. So I read this book too, as did many others. And one thing that came out of it was that it was a pretty seminal work. It's a pretty seminal work. It's got all the big blocks that you need to do. But the problem with it is that how do you implement it if you had to implement this in an organization? It's too high level for that. That's the point at which Ram Charan got together with Franklin Covey, the board member of Franklin Covey. This is Stephen Covey's company. And they created something called the 4 Disciplines of Execution. I'm going to talk to you about the 4 Disciplines of Execution. For the longest time, I was the only consultant in the country who was doing any work on this. All the case studies in the book are from clients that I work with. I just want to talk to you from that experience. What I'm going to talk to you about is quite simple. The concept is not difficult. It was really the whole idea of simplifying it from seminal work to an implementable set of things, or a process, if you might call it. So it's simple, but simple doesn't mean that it's easy to implement. And that's really where I want to go. Look, ultimately, we're all in the game to achieve results. That's the basic objective of anybody being in a business or being in a job. And to achieve those results, when you're trying to chase those results, there are a bunch of things that you can't control. Obviously, areas that you can't control, you spend time on those, it's not much you're going to get by way of results. The other side is the things that we can control, which roughly fall into, let's say, 2 categories: strategy and execution. If you look at strategy, there are roughly 2 types. There are management-driven strategies, which are things like this. You have the authority, power, position. You can sign off on any of these things: investing capital, getting more people on board, acquisitions, etc., etc. But when you start looking at business strategies that need to be implemented through the organization, then they become employee-driven, and there are things like this. For example, no management can say we want to improve customer experience by 10 points, and voila, next year customer experience improves by 10 points. It'll change only if employees up and down the organization, whether they are in sales or they're in marketing or they're in delivery or production or whatever it is, it's even finance or any other supporting functions, legal, etc. Unless everybody gets involved in that and everybody does something, you're not going to improve your customer experience unless it's a cooked book, right? Or it's customer engagement, or it's quality of service. Any of those things or things like it that are employee driven are, they're different from what is management driven. But these are usually tougher to implement. They're tougher to implement for some. There may be more reasons than the 4 I'm mentioning here, but the first one is, do people buy into what you're saying? It's one thing to say you're the boss, you've got the best strategy in the world, and all that kind of stuff that happens in a in a town hall or something like that. But what's really happening is only half the people were even listening to what you were saying. Of that, only half of them understood what you were saying. Of that, only half of them knew what they had to do to achieve your new grand plan. And of the ones who knew what they had to do, only half of them actually did it. So if you take 100 people, you'll come down to some 6 or 7 people that actually do this stuff because they bought into it. So the biggest challenge with behavior-based strategies is buy-in, and that leads to ownership. The second is discipline. All of us are very good at doing new things. We're happy to do them for 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever it is. And then after about a month or 2 months, there's a new flavor in town and you forget it. So the second big challenge is maintaining that discipline over time. So those are two big challenges that that most people face when they're trying to execute something. Now, the issue with buy-in usually is this. Look, I mean, this is a typical sequence of things. There is a desire to improve. Every business is in the game to improve itself. There's plenty of messaging that you hear, emails, town halls, company meetings, blah blah blah. Then teams must take ownership for whatever is discussed in those meetings. That leads to personal accountability and habits. But unfortunately, what ends up happening is this is where the glass ceiling hits it. There's plenty of desire to improve. It's written in all kinds of places. Leadership keeps talking about it, but it doesn't translate into team ownership. And when it doesn't translate into team ownership, you end up having, last year you had strategy A, people were executing to plan A. This year you have strategy B, people are still executing to plan A. It doesn't really get you to where you want to go. It takes some effort, and that effort can't be, like I said earlier, it can't be, just the top 20% employees of the company or the 10 senior most employees of the company who are going to make that change. It's got to be the whole organization. So if you look at the basic idea behind this, this is basically a standard distribution curve. It's a perfect distribution curve. It says there are 20% people who resist anything new, 20% will adopt, and 60% will sit on the fence, neither being this side or that side. But the theory behind this is this: what if I were to move this peak to the right? So what if it looks like this? Right? If I have a higher number of people moving towards adopters, would I get better results? And there's plenty of, there's empirical evidence that proves that, and it's not just theoretical empirical evidence, it's empirical evidence in terms of real businesses with real results. If you move more people to the right towards the top 20% of your organization, if you move performance levels there, you are bound to get better results. There's just no question about it. The good thing about this is next year, if you take this curve and then move it back into a normal distribution, and then change it back to this over the following 12 months, you have a model that can continuously improve, take your performance to the next level, and remove the dependence on perhaps just the top 20% of your people. But how do you do this? How can we make it easier to get these results? Because this is still quite theoretical. The idea is this idea is not actually, in some senses, not very different from what we discuss in or what we do in Action Coach. There are some common parts. There are others that are not. But the whole idea is to moving away from the idea that success lies in a great plan or a great strategy or something like that. It does not. The strategy may sound fantastic, but knowing you have to know that it's the systems underlying it that are going to get you the success that you need. So, Ram Charan very openly says, give me first-class execution over first-class strategy any day. I'm better off with both being first-class, but, if I don't get both, I'd rather take first-class execution. And what this model talks about is two things. One is about aligning 6 things that need to be in place before you can start going out into hardcore execution. And the second is the 4 disciplines of execution themselves. So I'm just going to move into this area and talk about these things. So if you look at we know this as coaches, we work with a lot of business owners. We ourselves are business owners, and we know that when we work through the 6 steps, If you look at the two things in the middle, whether it's the processes that you create on the organizational side or the operational side or the people side, that's where the real engine is. That's where the processes that can help businesses scale. So in the 4DX context, it's not very different. The system is really a process that helps you achieve something with more ease and more consistency than you would have achieved otherwise. And it just quickly defines a great system that says that the idea is a good system is not something that's going to try and be everything for everybody. I think that's a fundamental choice, that the 4DX system asks people to make. You have to align behind what's the most important thing that you want to achieve in a period of time. If you align behind everything, in fact, Bossady, I think in the book says that if somebody comes to me and says, here are the top 10 things I need to do, they don't know what they're talking about. So, focus is really important. The second thing is, how do we make it easier? How does it become independent? And can it sustain over a period of time? That's how the 4DX world looks at a great system. And it talks about 6 things that need to be set right before we get into the core of execution. The first question is the one right at the head, which is, do we have the right people with the right skills in the system? In other words, are we hiring the right people, or do we know what the right skills are, etc. The second thing is, are those people with those skills doing the right job? Are they in the right kind of roles where their skills will be used and their experience will be used for the best impact? So org structure is the second one. The third is structure is fine, but are we rewarding them for the results that we want? This can have some pretty remarkable results. Just to give you a sense, about 3 years back, I started working with a company that does GIS solutions. These are, it's in a rudimentary kind of sense, something like a Google Maps, but this is used for doing GIS solutions for exploring for oil or for minerals and stuff like that. So it's pretty high end. They had just moved out of a consulting kind of arrangement because in this country at that time, the rules were that if you were doing strategic software, you had to have a Indian partner with a majority stake. So NIIT was that partner. But that rule has since changed. And the problem that Esri was having was that most of their compensation models, rewards models were based on NIIT Technologies, rewards concepts. And NIIT Technologies is not a product sales company. They're a system integrator. So, we worked on the rewards model. I don't want to spend too much time, but net that year, Esri did about 80-85 crores worth of business in the country. In 3 years today, we're sitting at 200 crores. We've done about 2-3 revisions of that. I'm not saying rewards was the only thing, but certainly when we did the deal analysis and stuff like that, we found, there were the top end business, there were just 3-4 deals. You had to get, 5 crore plus, you had to get 10 customers in every year. If you looked at the next level, which was say, 2 crores to 5 crores, you had to increase that from 15 customers to 25 customers. And we built the reward systems based on that. That had a dramatic effect. It's just one example. There are many others like this that one could use. The fourth piece is, do they have the tools and do they have the tools to do the job that they need to do? Do they have data? Is there some kind of system that gives them all the information and things that they need to get the job done? The fifth piece is, do decisions get made close to where the work actually happens, which is on the front line? Or are decisions being made right at the top? In other words, is this a highly bureaucratic system, or is this a system where people have the empowerment to make the decisions that they need to make operationally, and do they know what they are? And the last of them is, do we have the processes in place to enable people to get the job done? So if you don't get these things roughly aligned at least to a scale of 7.5 to 10, 7 on 10 or 7.5 to 10, execution will be a struggle. I'm not saying it'll fail, but anything you do with the 4DX will be a little bit of a challenge. Now we know this. if you look at these two things, if you look at leverage and team, it's pretty much, this part is all leverage and team. These three circles here. This part sits in leverage too. So, I mean, it's not a very different concept here. And I'm sharing this just so we understand that, we're on the same fundamentals here. I think the other concept so this is still concept, and this is still about engaging people, but just doing engagement of people does not lead to great execution. That's still just blueprinting. If you want to get real engagement, it happens because that engagement has a context, and that context is the goal that you're trying to go after. In Action Coach, we talk about common goal. Here we talk about wildly important goal. They're roughly similar in the way they work in the context of an organization. So engagement is one thing. You created the loops for the engagement, but if you want to go to get results, then that engagement is going to come if you put an execution engine in place. And that's why we come to, how do you execute strategy? And that's where the four disciplines come into play. Now, there's a fair amount of research, and many of you who've been in the game for a long time would know that when people are looking at leadership talent in organizations, there are, these three things will stick out. It doesn't matter which year it is, which century it is. You want people to think big, whether you're a businessman or you're an employee who's responsible for growing an organization's business. Everybody wants their leaders to think big. They want them to adapt quickly because we live in, like everybody says, a VUCA world. Things change very rapidly. So adapting quickly is important. The second key thing is that's fine. You can think big, put a strategy together, but if you don't make it happen, that's no good. So developing and executing strategy is the second big area. And the third is really to look at coaching and improving performance. Why I talk about these things is that although 4DX is really about that word in the center called execute, the way it gets implemented, with bottoms up sort of participation of teams is you're really encouraging a great deal of participation. You're really encouraging a great deal of thinking out of the box. And those of you who've led sales teams, I think many of you still do in your businesses. You'll know that, if you look at the market and you say, okay, market's growing at 7%, I should grow at 10%. And then you say, okay, we're going to grow at 10%, you'll get a lot of grumbling salespeople. But if you go to the salespeople and you say, right, so how much can you grow your patch? They'll probably come back with a bigger number. So by doing this bottoms up, we really encourage a lot of, thinking out of the box. That's a little bit bigger than most others. We have a system that can help people turn on a dime because you have a system. If something changes on you, you could still apply that system to the new environment. And so, that's the reason why I even put up this slide. And 4DX does a whole lot of things in that area. So let's talk about what prevents the team from getting the most important things done. It's called the whirlwind. There's a whole lot of research that went into saying, why is it that when people know what the most important goal for a business is, that they don't get to spend enough time on that, working on those goals? People did all kinds of analysis on it till eventually they said, it was a head slap kind of a moment, saying, right, so it's the day job. There's so much to do during the day. It keeps you so busy, it wraps itself around your head. You're just not able to focus on things that need more time and more thinking. For instance, planning, prevention, preparation, self-development, team development, motivation, things that need time and effort. You just don't get the time because you're too busy answering WhatsApps and emails and fighting off a customer who's on fire, or your best employee just decided this morning that they're going to quit. You're just dealing with that kind of stuff. And so one has to really work around that. Urgent stuff, what we call the whirlwind, doesn't knock on the door. Yeah? It just walks in. Whether you wanted to walk in or you don't want to walk in. It's like the boss putting out a mail at 8:30 in the morning. You go open Outlook first thing in the morning at 9, and he says, I want this report by 12:30, gone, first half. So that's the kind of stuff that sits here. Those are the important things. These are the things that you need to work on. Now, if you allow the whirlwind to get on top of 8 hours or 10 hours a day, whatever it is that you work on, then you're not going to be able to act on the goals. Does this ring a bell? It sounds a bit like acting on the business, not working in it. So I think conceptually it's fairly similar. Of course, we have to live with both these things. So we need to address that because most of us do end up spending way too much time on those things that are urgent and not on things that are really going to make a difference in the long term. To address that in a simple kind of way is this model. We call it the 4 disciplines of execution. The first of those disciplines is focus on the must-win battles. First thing is you need to know what your must-win battles are. We call them must-win battles or wildly important goals. You can't have more than 1 or 2 of them. Let me give you an example. Take an example of, say, Indigo Airlines. It's an airline. They fly aeroplanes. They need to sell tickets. Their passengers come to the airport. They need to be checked in. Their bags need to be handled, taken onto the aircraft. The aircraft needs to be maintained. Refueling needs to be done. Food needs to be loaded. Whatever you do with the ATC has to be done, and then the pilot has to fly the plane. Everybody does that. Which airline doesn't do that? Everybody does that. But what Indigo said was, we're going to do this on time. And they made it a business. They said, doesn't matter what. So a lot of people say, the flight from Delhi to Bombay takes 1 hour, 45 minutes. These guys give you a timeline of 2 hours, 15 minutes. But you know what? Whether he leaves 10 minutes late or arrives 10 minutes early, he gets you there in the time that he tells you. We made a business out of it. And the focus is extremely strong. I'll talk more about it as we go. But this is a goal is a result. And results are not what's, you can't really focus on those. Think about the 5 ways. You have to act on the things that get you to those results. And that's what the leading indicators are, or the lead measures are. So this is the ability to work as an organization with a work breakdown, with a cascade that says if this is the organization's wildly important goal, then what do each of the division leaders do or business unit leaders do? What do each of the people reporting to them do? And further, all the way down to the front line. And then you start looking at the leading indicators saying, how's each guy going to implement these? So when we work with five steps, we work with one business owner. This tends to be more complex because it involves either a whole division or sometimes a whole organization. To the extent that I once worked for 2 years with Cox and Kings. Unfortunately, that company is no longer there. But I worked with 13 divisions and 1,200 employees where they cascaded down 3 primary goals, which were how many repeat customers did we get, how many referral customers did we get, how many new customers did we get. And it didn't matter whether it was a 3,000 crore Forex business or it was a 50 lakh luxury travel business, which had started just yesterday. We were basically measuring the same kind of stuff for everybody. The third discipline is creating compelling scoreboards. The defining word here is compelling. Compelling means not something that tells you about all that's happened in the past, but something that tells you what you need to do going forward to achieve your goal. So it's the difference between a cricket scoreboard on the ground that tells the batsman on the pitch how many runs they have to get and how many overs are left to get it, as opposed to a cricket scorecard in which the coach will sit with the player and say the last 10 times you went out with an asking rate of 8 runs or more, your scoring rate was less than the asking rate. That's a scorecard that tells you about the past. It's important, that's fine. But here we are talking about execution, and execution happens in the present or in the future. It doesn't happen in the past. You got to look at things that are going to get you there. And the fourth discipline is how do you establish a rhythm around your business where you're able to report back and review on this system. When I saw this, I said, this is just different words for what I did for 15 years at Microsoft. This is what we did all the time, every week, right? What is it that we're chasing right now? What is it that everybody's going to do? How is it going to get measured? And when are we going to review? When and how are we going to review it? So it looked pretty interesting, and it's pretty powerful, and it does a great job here. So let's look at discipline one. Where do these things come from? Typically, these could be, the source could be a vision, strategy, mission, those kind of areas. But it could also be significant gaps that you have in the market, for instance, market share or geographical presence. It could be introductions of new products that are the basis of your growth strategy, and how do you take that out to market? It could be how do I improve customer satisfaction because customer satisfaction levels are really low. We did a part of this with Siemens about 4 years ago. Uh, Over 2 years, we worked with about 900 white collar workers to improve their net promoter score from 17. They wanted to take it to 34 in 2 years, but it went up to 53. I think some of that 53 was cooked, but anyway, I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody. The point is, if some of it was managed, then maybe it did go to 34 or 35. So it's really about what's the most important gap, what's the most important growth area, what's my vision, what's my strategy, how am I not aligning behind it, that works best when you're looking at identifying your wings. So how does this work? I'm putting it very simply, of course. In the engagement, there's a whole lot of work that goes underneath. If you look at this grid, right, top to bottom, it says what are the very important things that I need to do and what are the not so important things I need to do. And left to right, it says what are the areas in which there's no gap. It may be important, but there's no gap. And what are the areas that there is a big gap that we need to fulfill. And when you make a list of things and you try to sort of map it on this as a group, you'll probably find things scattered like this. And what you've got to look for, obviously, is the goals that find their way on the top right. This is a simple take on a Gartner quadrant. So basically, your wigs live here. Wildly important goals live here. I've worked with different ways of doing this. Can you pick up 2 to 3 wildly important goals? Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes it works, but I'm generally over time, I'm more in favor of saying, take a shorter term project, say about 6 months, and say, I will work with one wildly important goal and fix that wildly important goal in these 6 months. And then we'll come back to the next one and then the next one. So you create a kind of engine to make this work very strongly. Okay, what's important here is, in a sense, it's a kind of takeoff on SMART goals. But what it says is, you need to have 3 things. You need to have a starting line. So where am I starting from? What's my finish line? Where am I going to? And the third is, by when am I getting there? It usually exposes a whole lot of things. I did a project with Pepsi in one of the southern states. Now, Pepsi and Coke have a very strange situation. One of the two usually has a massive market share in a market, and the other one has a really low market share. I don't know why it happens. Maybe whoever got in first got the distribution act together. I don't know what it is, but that's how it is. And this state, the cola share that Pepsi had was about 15%, and Coke had the balance 85%, not through Coca-Cola, but mostly through Thumbs Up, which was an acquisition. When I went and I started talking to the team out there saying, okay, so what's your why? What's your goal? They said, we want profitable growth in the share of this product. And when I talk about focus, I said, look, let's be clear about this. At the end of the year, when I come back, your team comes back and says, we achieved our profitability, but we didn't achieve revenue. Would you say that your WIG has been achieved? They said no. I said, all right. On the other hand, if the team came back and said we achieved our numbers, but we blew it on cost, and we actually went into the red, or our profits were lower than what we expected, would that be a success? They said no. I said, then why are you setting yourself up? Get your focus right. Is it volume? Is it profitability? What do you want? So these things go into a wallow. Really, I mean, I'm really surprised, but they go into a wallow. Those guys went into a 4-hour discussion before they came back and said, no, I think volume is the real issue. I did a similar project with Rockwell Automation about 6 years ago, I think. We started this discussion at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we didn't finish till 3 in the morning. And they had just completed their, their AOP, their annual operating plan. So although it looks very simple, it looks like people should be on top of that. I agree, people should be on top of this, but they're not. And so it's important to be, to understand that just because it's simple and people should be on top of it, therefore it is done, is a bad assumption. It doesn't work that way. So here are some examples of wildly important goals. You'll notice one thing: there's a start point, there's an end point, and there's a timeline. But you'll always find just one endpoint. There's no mix here that says, "Oh, let's get revenues up and let's also get market share up." By the way, that's not focus. If you're not think about the Draupadi Swayamvar. Yeah. What happened? You guys know, right? You read the Mahabharata. This guy was looking down at. I know it's a take on mythology, but it's a great one. He looks down at water. There's a spinning wheel up there with a fish on it, and he looks down in the water and shoots the eye. How do you think that happened? There's only one singular focus. If he was like, oh, by the way, I shouldn't, what's going to happen to the arrow if it misses, and what is my safety plan, and this, that, and the other, nothing would have happened. He would have missed it most probably. Similarly, here's another example from accounts. If you want to reduce DSO, you have to say from how many days to how many days from by when. So it's very, very specific when you look at the goals. Sometimes it's really hard to find them. I'll give you 2 examples. I'll go back to Rockwell Automation. When we started at that time, Rockwell they make drives for companies to put in their plants, so electrical drives and things. They have a huge market share in the US. They are like 90+ market share in the US in a certain segment in which they work. Oil and gas is a huge business for them. When they operate in India, oil and gas is a completely different ballgame. Market share is pretty low. China was slowing down. If you remember, 6-7 years back, there was this whole thing. Modi ji had just come in, and Achhe Din Aayenge was a big refrain, but manufacturing here was also up the tube, the industry. But US was looking at the India market for growing the business, because India had promised. India and China had promised, you don't grow too much from a 90% market share like the one they have in the United States. So when they started thinking about what's our growth strategy, they said, should we put oil and gas in here? Half the team said we are setting it up for failure because oil and gas in India is largely public sector. It's a different dynamic from say other markets where it's not. And if you don't put oil and gas, which is where you have most of your referral customers and things like that, how do you go into other industries where there are other players like Siemens or Alstom or various other people in that space? And so eventually, the goal that they hammered out was that the only way we are going to do this is if we grow at, say, 2% above market. Market wasn't growing by much. Let's be clear about that. But if you're growing 2% above market, in a market that's stagnant, you're gaining 2 points of market share over somebody else. And that seemed to be something that they could do, they could sustain over a period of time. They've been using this for 6 years. I worked with them for 3. First year, they grew at 2%, 2 points higher than market. Second year, 2 points higher than market. Third year, 2.5 points higher than market. They seem to be doing pretty well. Of course, they've had a huge change, a huge shift in strategy. They're moving towards software and things like that. But that's one example of how it's not so easy to come up with something like this. In Cox and Kings, when I had my first conversation with Ursula Kerker, who ran the India business, he said, we want to improve customer satisfaction. And then we figured we can't do that because, she said market share. And we figured we couldn't do that because that industry, the travel industry, is very funny. I mean, 50% of the business comes from 4 or 5 big players like, at that time, Cox and Kings, Thomas Cook, Sita, etc. And 50% is our mom and pop garage operators. So it's very hard to figure out what the market share is. So we said, we can't measure it, we can't improve it. So she said, well, then let's go for customer satisfaction, which was pretty much the same issue. They didn't have a baseline, and it would take 3 months to get one because the number of people that they deal with for us to get a decent sample size would have taken a long, long time. And they and so we dropped that. That's how after I think 5 or 6 discussions over maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we came to 3 things. We said, if we get can we measure repeat customers? Answer was yes. Can we measure referral customers? The answer was about 98% accuracy. Said, can we measure new customer ad? Well, of course, every business does it. So we said, if we pick these 3 things, the first thing it tells us is that we have satisfied customers out there. That's why we're getting repeat and referral. And that's showing up in new customer ad. And if we've got new customer ad, we can look at the percentage of customer ad, we can look at the percentage of revenue ad and compare that with market. Now, we have market data, we don't have market share. So, what's the total market worth? Yes, we know that with some accuracy. So that should give us a sense of what happens. These are some pretty involved conversations, and I often tell people not to be taken lightly. Once that gets identified, of course, then other people's cascading wildly important goals get created, and that should give us a fairly good sense that here's how the math works. If there are 500 people in an organization and we don't have that clarity, each individual doesn't have that clarity about what they're supposed to deliver. The energy of the organization sort of spreads in all directions, like a hedgehog. Think about a hedgehog or a porcupine. The quills are going in all directions. But if there's one goal and everybody is focusing on that, I'm not saying you focus only on that and forget everything else you do in your job. Your day job still exists. This is your focus. This is the one that you really want to achieve. And if you don't achieve this, then anything else you achieve really doesn't matter very much. If the attention of all 500 people or the energy of all 500 people is pointed in that one direction, I mean, heck, you're bound to get a better result than if energy was spread around. So that's the way it really works. If you look at discipline 2, it says what we talk about in the 5 ways. It says, look, don't focus on the outcome. You can't control the outcome. Focus on the inputs. This I found is the toughest thing to accomplish with a large group of people, or in fact, even with a few people. So while in Action Coach, Brad and his team have been kind enough to tell us what those lead measures are, and they are, add more, get more leads, convert more leads, do more transactions with customers, etc. Those 5 things. In other businesses, people have not defined it. Unfortunately, we have become so outcome focused in our lives. People will come and say things that are roughly equal to, I have to do 52 crores in the year, therefore I have to do 1 crore every week. And if I have to do 1 crore every week in 5 working days, I have to do 20 lakhs of sales every day. Wo to ho jayega. My question is, boss, not ho jayega. My question is, can you prove it in a sustained kind of way for 30 days that you get 20 lakhs of business? What are the things you do to get 20 lakhs of business every day? If you know what those are, then I'll believe that you'll be able to get 20 lakhs of business every day. And people really struggle with that. What fight with you? It's quite amazing how challenging it is down the line. Main reason for that is leaders don't encourage people to think. They just tell them, ye karke aao. And so everybody's expecting the leader to tell them what to do. That's like leader is a Superman. And we know that's not the truth. So then what happens is the failure belongs to the leader. Because the guy down the line is going to come back and say, sir, aapne bola tha, hua nahi. So I think, that's why this ends up being so difficult. And so when we build lead measures, we also do that bottoms up. We ask people, we tell people, you know what, you're empowered to decide how you're going to get the result. Your goal may not be something that you want. I mean, that's, you may not have your way, but you must have your say in that also. But when it comes to what you're going to do, you should come up with that, with those solutions yourself, unless you want some specific help with that. Now, how do lead measures work? So your wildly important goal is a lag measure because it's an outcome. You only know the result at the end of the period. Say it's a 1-year project. So at the end of 52 weeks whether you achieved the goal or not. And then there are milestones in between, like a quarter or a month. So you only know at the end of the month. Unfortunately, the challenge with that is it's already too late to do anything about it. Lead measure, on the other hand, is the action you take to get to that result. So think about this. The result you will know at the end. When you know the result, if it was a good result, excellent. But if it wasn't a good result, you can't do anything about it anymore. But a lead measure is the behaviors and the actions that lead to that result. Therefore, you have the opportunity to change them on the way to that result. If it's a year-long project, you have that opportunity 52 times. Every week, you can look at your lead measures and see whether, if you're achieving those lead measures, are they achieving your lag measures or not? If they're not, you can change this. Boss, ये तो change करने नहीं देगा कोई goal. So you can work here, and that's really the key. Lag measures are things that measure the outcome, and lead measures are things that measure the behaviors and the actions that would lead us to the outcome. A very important word here, measuring behaviors. Most of us know what the behaviors are, but we fail to measure them. Because here we get into that whole rate of conversion. If I do so many meetings, I'll get so many purchase orders, I get so much revenue, etc., etc. So it's really about measuring those behaviors. But two properties that lead measures must have. One is they need to be predictive, which means they should predict that you'll achieve the goal. And the second is they should be in our control. So here are some simple examples. If I want to lose weight, my wildly important goal could be, I want to reduce my body weight from X to Y, 90 kilos to 70 kilos by 31st March. So what are the things I can do to achieve this? I can't just write this on a piece of paper, stick it on a wall, sit in front and stare at it all day and hope that my weight will come down. We know that, right? Here are a couple of lead measures that I could use. I limit my calories, exercise a bit. Unless there's a medical issue, I should be able to lose my weight. You'll see they are both predictive and influenceable. It's in my control, and it will lead here. There's an 80% chance, not 100%. 80% chance here. If I had to reduce industrial accidents, for instance, from X to Y, what would I do? I'd probably increase compliance on safety standards by X, Y, Z. For example, when somebody is using a welder should use something to protect his eyes. If you're out on a construction site, you must wear a helmet. When you're going up on a platform, you must harness yourself. You must wear boots that will save your feet from getting hurt by falling things or tripping over something or fire or whatever, heat, whatever it is. If you have to increase store sales from X to Y, you want to make sure that the top items that sell shouldn't be out of stock, or they should be visible on the shelf. So another lead measure could be, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when children are coming home from school, I want to make sure that I do a round of my store to see if there's plenty of Maggie and chocolate and Coke on the shelf, so that when they're walking past and they badger their mom saying, I won't eat what you've cooked, the mom says, I want Maggie, then she can get the Maggie. Right? So it's things like that that'll lead to it. So in a sense, here's one I took from a company that makes clinical equipment that I did this program with. They wanted to increase their share of market in government. And that meant that, you just had to increase the number of key opinion leader visits that you made every month in government hospital. It wasn't going to happen otherwise. And, the result and the actions right here. You may say this is really simple, but when you start measuring it week after week, it really starts making a difference. And it's actually quite similar in essence to the 5 ways. So, if I had to lose weight, lead measure would be diet, exercise. If I had to, in a sales team, increase new client sales of a product line, then perhaps a lead measure would have more face-to-face client meetings. If I were in the accounting department and I wanted to improve cash flow and I wanted to reduce DSO from X number of days to Y number of days, perhaps I'd, just make it a habit to do this. Right? 1 week before payments are due every week, I just sit down and say which payments are due this week and shoot out personalized reminders to those customers. If I'm in a not-for-profit and I'm looking at donors, maybe I need to meet face to face with potential donors every week, 5 of them, so that I could get more. Next week, or maybe 2 weeks later, I can figure out if meeting 5 is enough, or if meeting 3 is good enough, or maybe I need to increase this to 7, 8, or 9. But I have an opportunity every week if I measure the behavior. I know the behavior. I know we know the behavior. But if I measure the behavior, then I know, I have the data to go back and prove it. So the basic philosophy is this: if your lead measures are predictive and you can move them, i.e., if you say I'm going to meet 5 board members or high value donors every week, and you do that, and your lead measure is predictive of achieving the goal, then you should achieve your goal. That's the relationship. How do you identify lead measures? Here are some simple steps. I think it always starts with a laundry list, and then we have a similar kind of grid that we created for the WIGs. But this one's different in the sense that it measures predictiveness and influenceability. So if you're, make a list of all the things you want to do. There are a few rules that I like to follow. We're talking about execution. Please avoid putting one-off activities in this. One-off activities are not execution. They may be important. A lot of people say, I'll launch a product, and when I launch that product, I'll get revenue from it. It's a one-off activity. It's important. Please do it, but execution is about discipline. So in execution, let's put down the activities that we need to do before or after the launch that will get us there. There are a few other rules which I'll share, but we map them in a similar kind of way. There may be something that's highly predictive, but it's not influenceable. Like, for instance, I might want to meet the Prime Minister to achieve something that I want to. It's highly predictive. If I go meet him, I'll get the result I want. But you know what? I can't really influence it. I don't know if he'll give me a meeting. So avoid those. If it's not predictive and not influenceable, it's probably, it's a waste of time. If it's highly influenceable but not predictive, then then it's it's busy work. I keep working on that stuff, but I get no results. It's a waste of time. And therefore, we've got to look at things that are highly productive and highly influenceable. And that's where lead measures live. I just said that there are some other rules that one should follow. Of course, they should be predictive and influenceable. But it doesn't help if there are things that we're already doing and we are doing regularly. So it's important if they're chronically inconsistent. In other words, we know we need to do this, but we're not doing it because we're just inconsistent with it forever and ever. And it's an important thing to do that will get us results. It happens quite often. So, like for instance, in Microsoft, we were so busy skimming the cream of the surface because it was an underserviced market. We were meeting our revenue goals by just selling Windows, Office, and a few easy sell products to the market. Whereas long-term growth needed us to build a very strong community of system integrators who would start putting solutions together on our products and therefore sell more products for us. We just didn't do it. We knew it was important. We knew it was important for 10 years and we didn't do it. Right? क्यों? क्योंकि Windows तो बिक ही रहा है, Office तो बिक ही रहा है, number हो रहा है बस. So there are things like that happen. They should be specific, so it shouldn't be wishy-washy. We should meet more customers, not good enough. We should meet 5 more customers every week. That's measurable. And they should be mutually exclusive. Because if you take 2, 3 lead measures that are dependent on each other and somewhere the chain breaks, one of them doesn't work, then the whole house collapses. But there's some bad news and good news when it comes to lead measures. They are pretty difficult to measure because at the end of the day, you're trying to measure behavior and activity. And that can be inherently unpredictable. The good news is, this is not saying 3 mahine baad hum aapko review karenge how much business we got. This is like every week we'll get in and say, you say what you will do, and then you come back next week and say whether you did or not. So it engages the team, but it gives the context to that engagement, which is what I spoke about earlier. It engages every participant in a weekly conversation towards the achievement of a single goal. That's why I say it engages the team. The bad news is lead measures are easily forgotten. I create one right now. I work on it for a little while, and then if I don't pay attention to it in my weekly reviews, it's very, very easy to forget doing them because they're repetitive. It's like I don't know how many of you have ever tried to lose weight. We all know weight lose करने के लिए क्या करना होता है. 2-3 महीने चलता है, and then it sort of collapses. I think I'm getting some messages on how many minutes left and so on. I'll finish pretty soon. So when you look at a scoreboard, we're looking at compelling scoreboards. The word is compelling. Everybody knows a scoreboard. But a compelling scoreboard is one that tells us what to do next. And it has 4 properties. It's like, actual IPL, you see the scoreboard on the ground. What all does it say? It doesn't say very many things. It's very simple. It tells all the players also, this is a player's scoreboard. It's not a coach's scoreboard. It tells you clearly what needs to be done next. It's highly visible. What's the point of having a scoreboard on a cricket ground in an IPL match that you can't see? What does it tell you? Nothing. It also tells you the right lag and lead measures because it tells you the target and it tells you kitni ball bachi hai, kiske kitne over bache hain, some basic things like that that tells you. And it tells you right there. You walk into an IPL match or a cricket match or anything else, a basketball match. 40 minutes after 30 minutes after it started, you come in, have a look, and the scoreboard tells you instantly क्या हो रहा है. 7 ओवर हो गए, 21 रन बने, 3 विकेट गिर गए. You know what's happening straight away. That's the kind of scoreboards you want. Now we keep telling people how to use graphs and how to use numbers and how to use where to put lag measures, where to put lead measures. Nobody listens. Teams make things like this. Right? This clearly has been made, in my mind at least, by a bunch of male engineers who are not very creative. They just said, is my wig green or is my wig red? And put some number underneath that. These are the lead measures. And they've got some sliders here telling you what's going on. So you get the whole story. These are more consultant type people, probably. I think this one, this came from, I don't remember. I don't remember who this is, but this is more sort of operational staff that's creating some pretty interesting stuff here. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on scoreboards, except that I've had a remarkable result from it. I once ran an inside sales operation in Microsoft where I was given $3 million to run it and told, please return $30 per per dollar that we've given you. So in sales, in impacted sales. So we had a target of 90 million. We were going at a rate of about 32 million is what I was going to return, which didn't look very pretty. So we called in some people who did a Six Sigma job on us. One of the things they said was put up a scoreboard on which every team leader comes in the morning and says, what was his goal for the previous day and what did he actually achieve? And from a run rate of what looked like about 32, 33 million, just to cut a long story short, it changed behavior so dramatically. We ended up returning $146 million in impacted revenue that year. That's the kind of impact this can have. Discipline 4, which I'm going to go to now. So the 1, 2, and 3 define the game. What's your goal? How are you going to achieve it? How are you doing? Right? This is how you play the game. Discipline 4. It's about creating a cadence of accountability. And there's one fundamental question that we ask. What are the 1 or 2 most important things I can do this week that will have the biggest impact on the scoreboard? Now look at this. It's a loaded statement. 1 or 2 is focus. Most important is priority. I can do personal. It's not about so-and-so will do such and such job. I commit on his behalf. Nothing doing. I can do this week. So it's time bound. That will have the biggest impact. So we're talking about impact on the scoreboard. The scoreboard is a team scoreboard. It's not a personal scoreboard. Right? So all of a sudden you've aligned everybody behind the most important things that you will contribute this week that will have an impact on the team's performance. Right? And then when the commitments start coming and going, you start getting a very high level of accountability. Nobody likes coming into a room week after week and saying, you know what, team, our scoreboard is red. I made 3 commitments last week and I didn't keep them. It's very tough to do that. It's even tougher for the leader. So we say this meeting that we're asking people to have every week is not a staff meeting. It's a meeting in which, it's a peer-to-peer meeting where they all come back and their accountability is to the scoreboard. So it becomes a part of the process. Team members do 3 simple things. It's a short meeting that we recommend, 15 to 20 minutes, depending on whether your team size is 5 to 8. You come back, report on last week's commitments, update the scoreboard on what's happened, and make commitments for the next week. That's all the team member does. each team member. What the leader does is reviews the scoreboard, clears the path if anybody is stuck. So sometimes you have, cross team dependencies and various things like that. It's for the leader to go and clear that path for you, and he recognizes performance. So that's a simple 20-minute meeting every week, same time, same place, same day. Uh, Mandatory for attendance. You can attend in person, you can attend on Zoom, phone, whatever you like, so that you can't come back and say, I didn't know this meeting was happening at so and so time. And so we ask people to make these commitments. Now, the relationship between lag and lead measures is that if you do work on the lead measures, it makes lag measures predictive. If you work on weekly commitments, it makes it influenceable, because weekly commitments are even smaller in nature. So for a sales team, if you have to increase sales and hold more face-to-face client meetings per week, that's still an intention. What would a commitment be here? Follow up with 19 or 20 client contacts to schedule these face-to-face meetings. Otherwise, they won't happen. Or you look at the accounting department, which is trying to reduce DSO. They're saying we'll send personalized reminder emails to all the clients 1 week before payment. Maybe they want to rewrite the email template and send it for feedback, because if finance sends something, the sales guy can get upset about why they sent what they hadn't sent. Not for profit, you want to have 5 face-to-face meetings with potential large-scale donors every week. A weekly commitment could be, I'm going to meet board members and ask for referrals. Who should I go and meet? And will they know me when I show up? But this is really about the discipline of doing this stuff week after week. And we say 6 things. Same time, same place, 15 to 20 minutes, talk about actions and results, not about reasons. You can do reasons in your review meetings, but this is an execution meeting. Focus on the team's scoreboard, hold each other accountable, and clear the path for people if they're getting stuck with something. This is just a simple way of saying how do you implement it, just to make sure that there is buy-in and there is clarity down the team on what needs to be done. Here are 4 simple steps. Ratify the WIGs so that everybody's on the same page. Identify the right lead measures with them so that they have a say in how they're going to go about doing it. Get them to create the scoreboard and then hold weekly WIG sessions. Just a question of, who are the kind of people who use this stuff. I'm sorry it looks ugly, but I just slapped it together this morning, just in case somebody asks me, ये तो बड़ा simple है, करता कौन है? Who are the customers who do this kind of stuff? So in the last 4 or 5 years, these are some of the customers that I work with. I work with about 50 odd customers, 50 odd projects, let me put it that way. Some of them were multiple regions. For instance, this was about 5 regions. Cox and Kings was 13 divisions. Mahindra Finance was 6 states. Kotak Life was across the country. Airtel was one place. Voda was Western India. So basically Maharashtra, Goa, rest of Maharashtra and Goa, whatever, Gujarat. So that's how it works. So that's what the 4 disciplines of execution are. I've used up my 1 hour. No, we probably don't have a lot of time for questions, but I'll be happy to take them now.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was fantastic. I have a couple of one quickly you can say. One was the fancy seating. Can you just tell what exactly is that in that graph?
I'm sorry?
Fence sitting.
Oh, fence sitters. Okay, these are people who are neither. So let's say you have you're saying here's a strategy that we're going to use as a company for growth this year. The fence sitters are the people who are they're neither going to support you nor are they going to oppose you. They're just sitting there waiting to see what happens. So you'll find lower levels of commitment. They'll just do enough work to not get noticed, but they won't put their best foot forward.
Okay. And you mentioned something like increased profit, but not the revenue.
Yeah, I was talking about a specific case that I worked with in Pepsi, where when they were crafting their wildly important goal, they wanted to put in 2 results. One was the revenue that they make, or the volumes that they sell, and the profitability that they achieve from those sales. And I had pushed back saying, boss, if you take 2 goals, suppose your people come back at the end of the year and say, I've achieved my revenue goal, but I have not achieved profitability. Would that be successful? They said no. I also asked them, would it be okay then if people came back and said, we achieved our profitability goal, but we didn't achieve our revenue goal? Would that be a success? And they said no. I said, that's the reason why I'm saying, please pick one, not two.
Okay, great. And in alignment, you mentioned processes and structure. What is
Yeah.
the difference in that?
Processes are typical business processes. So, for instance, you look at a sales process that says in the sales process, somebody's going to generate leads. Then let's look at our 5 ways. Somebody's going to generate leads. Somebody's going to convert those leads. Somebody is going to increase the number of transactions. Somebody will increase the average value per transaction. Somebody will increase the margin percentage. That's how you define the business, and you said this is how it's going to happen. The structure defines who is going to do it. So generating leads could be, say, inside sales or somebody in marketing, some marketing campaign. Conversion might happen from the sales team. Increasing number of transactions might happen from the channel team, might happen from marketing or from sales, but the structure tells you who's going to do it. Increasing the average value per deal could probably come from the services team, somebody who goes and creates value for the customer. So if the customer was otherwise going to buy a product, now he buys product plus some services around it. So the value of the deal goes up. And margins could be, margins could be if you're selling products, it could be the packaging team, it could be HR by just, looking at how and when they're going to hire people. So the process defines how the business is run, and the structure puts in place the people who are going to run those parts of the process.
So process means standard operating procedure, and structure means kind of a reporting organizational sort of thing.
So that's how it manifests itself. Yes. To put it in short, yes, that's how it manifests itself. It's standard processes is business processes. Structure is how you have organized how you've sort of distributed your organization in a way that each of those process elements can be addressed. So you know who's doing what.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was absolutely great session, Sanjeev.
Thanks. Any other questions? Maybe there's something on chat.
I guess everybody's appreciating you a lot for the session today, sir. So I guess it's a fantastic session which you have conducted for all of us. The disciplines of execution.
Sanjeev, just a quick question.
Yes.
Would it be possible to share the slides of this wonderful presentation?
Sure, I'll do that.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I'm conscious of.
Sanjeevji, one quick one. You have mentioned all these things, but to implement this for your experience, how long does it take for anyone?
So my take on that is simple. Your project layout typically should be not less than 6 to 12 months, and not more than 12 months. The implementation, my experience is that it doesn't work if you just go and do a training or something like that. And so it typically takes about 6 to 7 days of face-to-face consulting. And then it takes about somewhere between 50 to 60 hours of telephonic or Zoom-based support on that. If it's a 1 year project, if it's a 6-month project, you can divide the telephonic by half. It's about 25, 30 hours of telephonic support.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, then I think we can.
Yeah, if we quickly take a screenshot, if possible. So you have to take the screenshot.
Okay, screenshot. Let me stop sharing first. And then get a quick screenshot. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 people on the screen. So if everybody was
So I guess a lot of people have just left after messaging you, sir. So I think screenshot wouldn't work.
No, I'm saying there were 8 people on the screen, but there are 15 on the call. So whoever's still on the call, if you can just start your videos, then. Okay, terrific.
Yeah.
My screen's full, so now if anybody joins after this, I can't see them anyway. So, okay, I got a snapshot of this. And let me just make sure that I capture it on a slide so that I can share it. All right, I got it. All right, thank you so much for being patient. And
Yeah, it was a fantastic, and after a long time, I think that we could see some mind-boggling and food for the thought kind of stuff. I really enjoyed. I appreciate that.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Well, thank you,
Thank you,
coaches.
Sanjeev.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you,
Thank you
coach.
very
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, coaches. Have a great week.
Thanks. Sir. Okay, I'm ending the call, Yashodhan.
Sorry, sir.
I'm ending the call.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.